Hey there everybody, and welcome back. For those of you that are looking to set up Firebase or any other third-party database to essentially send and receive information with Appgyver, then stay tuned. We're going to be doing that using Appgyver's data resources and API throughout this video. Now, I want to note when we're talking about sending and receiving information, in this particular case, we are talking about sending and receiving text only. This video is not going to be walking you through how to send and receive files of any kind. So we're just working again with like text, numbers, things of that nature, not actual files or file types or anything like that. Now, if you're wondering what exactly is this good for, well, if you're looking to have information in your application, maybe lists that auto-populate from a database, or maybe something that simulates a forum or something along those lines, then this is a great option to allow users to send information or simply to allow you to update information within an interface like Firebase without having to constantly push updates to Android, iOS, or your web app, etc. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, you're going to need to go to Appgyver. If you're looking up a video like this, I'm assuming you understand the basics. So we'll do the crash course in a second. And then in a new tab, you will need to go to firebase.google.com and use your Gmail account or create one, and you'll get that set up. And we'll go through that together. And then the third thing you need to do is make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe below just to make sure that I know you enjoyed this so I can keep making new videos. So let's go ahead and jump in. First things first, in Appgyver, we're going to create a random page. Now, I'm just showing you the function and form for this. You can create this in any realistic way you need it to. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to Firebase and make sure that we actually have something to connect. So in Firebase, we're going to click Get Started. And then from here, you'll have the option to add projects. So we're just going to start from scratch. So we'll just call this, I already have test 1, so we'll just call this test 2. And then we will click Enable Analytics, unless you don't want that. I'll choose Default and Create Project. Now, while this is saving, usually takes about 30 seconds, maybe a minute or two, we'll talk through the application. So essentially, we want users to be able to send information, but we also want it to be displayed in the application. If you don't want users to send data, then you essentially just skip that step. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of build this out. So we don't really need this paragraph for this, but we'll just say fill out the form below. And then we'll keep that as is. And now we're going to need the users to actually enter something. So we're going to bring over an input field and an input field. And we will also bring over a button. So your crash course, your components are on the left, user interface is in the middle. You drag your features or components over. To edit the settings, you click the component, and you can change the style and details over here and adjust the logic settings down here, most of which we'll be doing in this video. So what we're going to do, first thing is first, we have to make sure that these two input fields have a value associated with them. So if a user enters, let's just say their name right here, it's not going to do anything. So we need to set variables to essentially associate with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this variables tab over. We're going to go to page variables, add page variable, and we'll add one for name and a page variable for description. These are the two most generic. You don't have to stick with only 2 page variables. Add as many or as few as you would like. And then, to make things less confusing, we will also name the fields by selecting them and naming them in relation or in the same way as the variables themselves. Naming is incredibly important. Once you mess up with naming, it makes it really hard to go backwards throughout this process, and you may end up having to start over. So we're going to click Value, and now we're going to associate with the data variable, page variable, name, save, and the same thing for the description. Now, if you would like, you're more than welcome to choose a set preview value, like enter name here, enter description here. Just so you can have something different, but it's entirely up to you. So we have these two set up. We're going to click Save. At this point, it's almost a guarantee Firebase is set up. So we now have project, we'll just say project 1 here. So we're going to go to Firestore Database, which is where we're sending and receiving info. And we're going to click on Create Database. And we are going to go to Start in Production and Next. Choose a location that works best for you based on, essentially just click Learn More if you have any questions. Now, the first time you create, if you start in production, the rules that are set lock the database. Or another way to explain it is the only way to make changes are within Firebase. So you can't read or write, which is an issue because obviously we want to do one, the other, or both. So the first thing we're going to do is change the rules. So select Rules. Now, you're going to need to view the docs and figure out what rules work best for you because security is huge for a lot of people. I'm just going to walk you through Allow, Read, Write. So this is open permissions, meaning anyone, as you can see here, can steal, modify, delete the data. But at least we can access it. And then we're going to create a sample collection. So we'll just call this Test. Next. Document ID. We will call this Tester. And then field, as you can guess, is name and description. Now my biggest recommendation, whatever fields you need sent or whatever fields you need received, make sure that you have them outlined first. Once we've created the schema and everything in Appgyver, going back and resetting everything can be kind of annoying. And we'll put a sample value in here. So Tyler talks. And description will just be description 2. And we'll just click Save. So now we have some sample data to build a schema from. Now, what I want to show you at this point is in the documents or in the description below. Again, we're just grabbing this information here. And we're going to go ahead and create this. So we're just going to paste the URL into Chrome and we'll click Enter. Don't worry about this. This is unrelated. This is just so we have the URL to edit. Now in Firebase, when you're in your actual Firestore database and you've clicked on a collection, so we're in the same spot, you should see up here, if you highlight, to the right of project, you'll see your project name. If you see some letters you don't recognize, don't worry about it. But we're going to grab this project name. We're basically copying between the two dashes, or slashes, I should say. And then you also need to make a note of your collection name. So we are going to change in the document that I'm providing, or in the description, just cut out name and paste in your Firebase project name, and then replace collection with test. Hit enter, and this should look a little familiar. You have your description and your name. So this is essentially going to be the schema that we're going to be working with. This is how we're going to send post requests from the system using some of this information, but Appgyver is going to make it look a little cleaner for us. So we're going to open our document and we are going to start with the first part. So the resource ID, we'll just call it test. You can name it whatever you want. Description will be test. Resource URL, we'll paste this in. Now we're going to go over to get, and I'm sure you guessed it, we're going to use the second half and just update that information. So we'll paste this in, and the name, again, we're just going to copy this part, and we will paste it in here. And then, as you guessed, we are going to paste in test here. And then in this part, you'll just put documents. Now we're going to go over to test, and we're going to click Run Test. If you get an error, look over your configuration again. Make sure this is the first half and this is the second. Again, check the description and make sure you've updated your actual project name. This is not the name you assigned when you first clicked into Firebase. It's whatever they provide, which will look similar, or most likely will. So as you can see, when we ran this, this should all look familiar. This is the same info, essentially, that pops up here. So we're going to click Set Schema from Response. Although this may look like a lot, this is basically Appgyver's way of saying, hey, there's a description that's a string, name that's a string. So this is a really good step, and you can also basically pull the created time and updated time as well. But we don't really need that for now. We're just going to click Save. So now at the very least we have the data resource configured. Now we need to add a data variable. So we're going to go to Data Variable, Add, and you'll click Test, because that's what we just created essentially. You'll see it's renamed to Test1, and you just click Save. So that was probably the easiest part out of everything we're going to be doing today. Now, the data information is configured. So I want to walk you through how to show the item in repeat, because that's what most people really want to see first. I like to put mine in a container, and essentially we're just going to drop in a row and a list divider and have the list divider essentially in repeat. So we'll drop it in the tree here. So the way that this is going to work is we will essentially, actually we may want to do this a little differently. Instead of the divider and the rows, I think I would rather set up something like a list item. So we'll drop that in and make sure that this is in the container. And then with the list item, what we're going to do is we're going to click repeat with data and variables. And then we are going to go to data variables, and we're just going to select our data variable. Now, every instance, essentially every document, it's going to be repeated. So that's why we use the collection. So every time there's a document, this data essentially could be displayed if we want it to. So now we have label and secondary. This can work with any of these features. So if you want to do an image list item, then if you wanted to, you could make one of these fields an image URL and then pull that in as the image. So it's very, very simple to do. So what we'll do is we're just going to get this started here. So primary label, we're going to click ABC, data item in repeat, and we'll make this the name. So just click the string value, save. And then the secondary label, data item in repeat, current, and we'll make this description and save. So now we have name, description. Just because you see 3 more of these down here doesn't mean it's going to show like this. That's just showing that this is a data item in repeat. So now we've done a little bit of work. Let's test it, kind of see what things look like. So if you click launch, open app preview portal, we have the application we're now working on. We'll click on helper. Now, in this case, I have my logo for my YouTube channel here. You'll see that I have authentication turned on, so we'll need to disable that real quick. So we'll just remove authentication, and then we'll just be able to click on home. So you'll see we have this option here, Tyler Talks, description 2. So let's test it real quick. Let's add a document, we'll call it new, and you just have to make sure the names are the same so Appgyver knows what to send and receive. So we have name and description, and we'll call this check it, and then we'll put out. So we're going to click save here. This has gone through. Let's go to Appgyver, and you'll see check it out appeared. But these aren't clickable. We'll walk through that in a second. And also, when people do something here, nothing's actually going to happen. So we have to get that set up as well. But at least we're headed in the right direction so far. So we have the values are set up. Next up is actually setting up the post request so that this can send and receive information. So since these are configured, don't forget to make sure that they have page variables associated. We'll click on the button and click show logic. We're going to open up the flow function market, and we're just going to type in HTML. And then there will be an HTML option. I already have it installed, but if you don't see it, the one that you're essentially looking for is going to be HTTP request. When you click install, it'll pop up in this side over here. And then all you do is drag this over. And this says, okay, an HTTP request is going to be sent. The first thing that you're going to need, I'm sure you guessed it, is going to be this right here, which is why we set this up earlier. So you're going to paste that into your URL. Again, this is basically saying, here is the document, and you'll notice when we refresh the page, we have the new one. So what this is pulling is essentially the data that's in these 2 documents, which are contained in this collection. So we have the URL. The next thing is make sure it's a post request. We're pushing or posting this information. And then we will expand these, and in the request body, that's where we're going to click on formula, and we're going to go over here, and here's where it can get confusing if you have too much information. make sure you're focusing on one of these requests only. Now what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to find the text fields, and you're going to start copying from the quote all the way down to the second curly bracket before create time. Now, if you have 20 items in here or one, it doesn't matter. You're looking for fields, and you're copying from fields down to that second curly bracket. Command or Control C. Jump back over to formula, and we're going to encapsulate this within brackets. So you're basically just going to put in a bracket, paste, put in another bracket. Now, this is not all there is to it. Basically, what this is doing is this is sending exactly what we already have. What we want to send is the user input. So we're going to go to our string value, and we're just going to replace what's in double quotes and the double quotes with our page variable for whatever corresponds to name. So we're going to put name. And then for the description, we are going to do the same thing. Delete the double quotes and what's contained within. Then go to page variable, and we're going to put description. This means that we are going to send in the name field whatever the user enters, and the same thing for the description. And just click Save and Save. So now we're going to test this out real quick. So for name, we'll just put in test, and in description, we'll put tester. And let's go ahead and click button. And you'll see we have test, tester. So we're posting, we're seeing data items in repeat. You can see we can press this multiple times, and it'll start to populate. And you can even see in Firebase where it's populating. And the cool thing is, in Firebase, if you want, you can delete the documents, and it'll reflect in the UI as well. So that's where this kind of starts to look like forums, except you can manage it outside of the application. So you'll see we deleted a couple, and so now we're down to 4 here. And there can sometimes be a little bit of a lag, but you don't need to worry about that. So we're going to delete these just to make sure that we're only working with one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we essentially have this set up to where users can click on this to open a new page, because that's probably one of the coolest features about this is I want to be able to click this and see the data. So the last thing that we need to do in Appgyver is we need to just create a new page, and we're just going to call this item in all caps. And then on this page, we already have 2 components. I'm just going to use these for the sake of time. And what we're going to do is we're going to create page parameters for these. So we're going to call one name, and we're going to call one description. And we'll click Save. And we will remove or toggle this off. Now, page parameters, essentially what they're doing is they're taking information from another page and displaying it on this page. So instead of having to create an item page for every single item a user posts, we create one page, and then the app just sends it the info to display here. So we will click on the component, and then we will go to Data Variables, Page Parameter, and we'll click on Name, and we will do the exact same thing for Data Variables, Page Parameter, Description. Save. Now we will save this. And then we're simply going to, you can hover over all of these to get your preview up, and then we just need to figure out which is which. So basically we're going back to the home, and we're going to select the first one, and we're going to go to Show Logic 4, and then we're going to go to Core, Open Page, and then we are going to select this, and you choose the new page for this to display, and click Save. Last thing, you'll notice when you click that page, the parameters display here. So now we're just going to select Name, and here's the tricky part. Make sure you choose Data Item and Repeat, and then find the string value for Name, and click Save. And then you're going to repeat for the description. And then I'll show you what this is going to look like in a second. So we're going to click Save. Now we're going to go back to our application. Now, if you're tired of seeing this full screen, we can right-click and click Inspect if you want to view this as a mobile app. And ignore everything on the right-hand side. We don't need to look at the developer tools, but in Chrome and most other browsers, you can deselect this and select this option, choose your device type, and then basically view the page as that device would. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this now, and you'll see it brought up item, and you can remove this header if you want, but we have Tyler Talks, description 2. So let's try something a little different. I want to see if this updates with something else. Let's type in some random letters and click button. And you should see essentially that pops up right here. And we'll make sure, so the last letter is D in this one, that pops up on the left, so they're popping up in the right area. And when we select it, the information's there. So you can make this as simple or complex as you want. The last thing I want to walk you through, because a lot of people may have questions about this, is what if instead of doing this, I want some kind of an image? Now, if you want to change the structure by adding fields here, you're going to need to jump through and essentially you're going to need to run your schema and testing again. So you don't have to start from scratch, but if you decide, you know what, I want to change this, I want to add more fields, I want to make this different, you're going to have to go in, you're going to have to go into data, click on your resource, go to get, go to test, you're going to have to run the test again, and then set the schema from the response. If you have to do this, I would highly recommend deleting all the documents except for one. And then when you set the schema from the response, you'll click run, set it from the response, and save it. And then you'll make sure that your new fields and everything else are configured the way we did in the beginning, and it should work. But if you don't do that, then Appgyver, like for example, if I wanted to add a third field, Appgyver is only going to recognize the 2 because I set the schema to only exist with 2. So make sure that you essentially start from the beginning, reset that if you need to. But what we're going to do now, we're going to make a simple change here. So I'm going to replace the list item with an image list item. Actually, let's do a large image list item. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to put item. And what I want to do is I want to show you how we can essentially set this up a little differently to work with images instead. So I only have 2 text fields. I don't want to reset the schema. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to repeat with, and then I'm going to go to data and variables, data variable. I'll select test and save. And then what I'm going to do is, now that it's repeating, I will choose, let's see. So we have the title. We're going to choose description text, data item and repeat, and we'll choose description. And then what we're going to do here is you can work with either the image source or the background image. I'm going to work with the image source. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to replace the name with an image URL, and then we'll be able to render that instead. Now, I want to note, before you jump into doing this, everything we've done up until now is complete. So if you like this application the way that it is, you have your basic form, people type information, hit the button, it populates here, you're all done. Now, if you want to set something up a little different, because I don't know too much about how to set up the actual file sharing in Appgyver, I'm going to walk you through image URLs instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Unsplash, and I just pulled up pancakes because I love pancakes and I feel like most people do. We'll right click on one and we will click copy image address. We will then go into Appgyver just to test the functionality, and in the name we're going to replace the value with this URL and click update. Now when we go into Appgyver, we don't really need to wait for this change to take effect, but you'll see it took effect there. So what we need to do at this point is we need to make sure that that image source actually makes sense here, because I haven't saved these changes. So we're going to go to image source, data item and repeat, and then you're going to select if you have an image URL. What I'm going to do is I would essentially select string value, but you'll notice you can't. So we have a quick workaround for this. You can choose the image, choose formula, and then you can delete all of this. And now we're going to essentially go to data variables, and we're going to find the image URL. So we have the name here, So we can select data.test.name. So you again would basically click on data variable, and you're trying to find whichever one holds that information. So I believe this one was the one that had the string value. So that's the one that you're going to look for, and you'll click save. And we may need to troubleshoot that just to make sure it's the right image. So let's see here. And another way you can cheat, because I didn't see the image populate, if you go to description text, which we were just using, the cool thing about the way the Appgyver is set up is you can select this, and you can go back and choose formula, and this is going to show you the formula for that current option. So we can copy that and close it and go over to image source, paste that in, and instead of description, we're just going to change this to name, and we'll click save. And that should pull up the repeated image properly. We'll click save, and then essentially we're going to go over here and boom, that image loaded properly with that picture of pancakes. And if you were interested, you can again continue to set things up. I'm going to refresh this page just to be safe, but essentially everything would work as expected. So you just want to make sure that you have the open page set up properly, because I did delete the old component. So we'll just add in the new logic, and then basically you click open page. We're repeating the steps from before with item. Description is going to be your description, and name is going to be your name. And then the last thing, I'm sure you caught it, is we need to make sure that on the new page we can actually display that image. So this one is the description, this one is the name. So we want to remove this and bring over an image component, and the source is going to be your page parameter, this is actually going to be your data variable. Now you have a couple of options here, but this is actually, let's see, so data variable, you have a couple of choices, but the easiest way to set this up is actually just to basically go with the page parameter. So let's see, where is that? And then you would have, again, the name. Images are a little temperamental in Appgyver, so we're going to go to formula. We'll delete all this, page parameters, and we're just going to double click name. So in the event that you see errors, you can kind of ignore it. We'll click save, save, save. And if you don't see anything, don't worry about it. So now we're going, this will automatically refresh. So we're going to go home. This is the page. If you click on the item, here's the picture and description too. Maybe you're wanting to see, okay, well, how is this going to work with a different image? So let's let a user post. So we're going to right click, and we're going to copy image address. And then we are going to go into this application, and we'll paste that in the name field. In the description, we'll just put it worked. We'll click the button, and you'll essentially just wait for that to populate, and you'll see item, it worked, and then the picture, and if we click it, it shows up. So that's essentially all there is to it, and you can replicate this for multiple pages in your app. You're just going to essentially replicate those steps by adding a new data resource for test 2, test 3, test 4, or whatever yours are called, and then you can set it up, configure this, play around with it. The trickiest part is, again, naming everything, and once you've set up your post request, making sure that everything's set up properly. So one last thing that I'm going to do is basically just go back to the home page, and final thing to note is on the item page, just remember that these are page parameters. That way they can be pushed to this page. So I got it a little mixed up a minute ago, but basically these are page parameters. And because it makes you save sometimes randomly, we're going to go back to the home page. And basically at that point, we're going to go ahead and look at this HTTP request one final time. Because you can set up if-then logic to make sure these fields are not empty. And if you wanted to, you could configure this as a patch request, but you have your URL pasted here. Make sure that this is post. In your request body, you're going to have everything from fields all the way down to the second curly bracket and then again, that'll be contained within curly brackets. And you're replacing with the page variable for your input fields to enable users to enter this info. That'll send it. And then you have your repeated field down here with all that information. And if you want, when you're sending info over, you actually have the ability, if you felt compelled to do so, when you repeat with, if you open up a page, you actually have the ability to send over other information. So we only have 2 fields in Firebase right now. But if you go in here, you have the ability to send over the create time, and you can also send over the update time. So if you wanted, those are things that you could send over, and Appgyver has a way to configure your dates because it'll come off in a very long series. So you can actually use a formula to configure that as well. So check out Appgyver's documentation on that. But if you wanted, you could send over that created date time and then use Appgyver's formatting to format that to make it look a little bit more attractive. But at this point, that is everything. As you can see, everything's working for us. All the pages are functioning. If you have any questions about anything I covered today, then feel free to drop a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.